Good number of people here to start. That's good to see. All right, I said 8 p.m. sharp. I meant it. So let's get to it. We're going to go over LEQ rubric writing first. We're going to be doing this in a way where I'm making a Google Doc that I will share out and make available after. All right, there we go. We got the Darjeeling tea today. Now we're cooking. Okay. All right, gang. So, let me pop out the chat here. Stick that right there. Okay. All right. So, if you have anything, any comments, any questions in chat, feel free to put them in or have somebody else put them in. If you're not from Shoreham, that's fine. You can certainly ask questions too. I'll do my best. But just kind of give everybody a sense, tonight's goal is to basically go through the LEQ rubric, how to write an LEQ, and if we get time at the end, theoretically, how to be picking an LEQ, kind of like what are the strategies I would recommend, things like that. So, at least in my students' case, LEQs are actually kind of the harder ones because we haven't done a great many of them, or at least we've done in a long time. We've done actually an LEQ beginning of the year, then 2 DBQs, and now we're at that point where obviously we need to come back to talking about the LEQ. So we're going to start by doing a rundown of the rubric. Then we'll go into how to actually write the thing, like what you should be doing strategy. We'll probably end up really mixing in and out of that. So here's the rubric, here's how you write that part, etc. There will definitely be commentary in the DBQ though, because some of it's an overlap. Now, it's not exactly one for one, but it is an overlap. So let's get into it. All right. Okay, first off, volume check. How am I sounding in the chat? If someone can give me a sense of how I'm doing, volume-wise, clear, loud enough, etc., etc. I got my window open. Is there any sort of street noise that's getting in the way? That kind of thing. Do let me know. Now is your moment. It's good. Thank you. Okay, great. So your LEQ rubric, right, is going to be 6 points. Just like the DBQ rubric, others may disagree. I do not think attempting to earn the final point is worth your time. It's real simple, right? In a perfect world, you try to get everything. It's not a perfect world. You're on a time clock. Every point's equally valuable. So points that are difficult or hard to get are not worth pursuing because at the end of the day, you have to strategize. So if you have 6 points available and the 6th one is only ever earned by, let's say, 2% of all students, but the first one is earned by 60% of all students, you better go after that first one because it's way more likely you're going to get it right. And if you spend time going after the 6th point, now again, you might say, well, I can do both. Well, no, you can't. Life's full of trade-offs, and it's no question. There's a limited time scale. Remember, the LEQ is, unless something bizarre is going on in the way you've been taught, LEQ is the last thing you're doing. It should be done after the DBQ. The DBQ is more important. However, that doesn't make the LEQ unimportant. You cannot afford to bomb this. So we're going to put together a strategy tonight to basically try to ensure that we have done everything we can to get 4 of the LEQ points. Very achievable, as you'll see. If you don't get it, it's your fault. So, sorry, I got kids yelling at my window. All right, let's talk it through. Thesis, context, right? These points are on both the DBQ and the LEQ. So I thought we'd take a quick look at just a comparison of them, right? So, response to the prompt with an historically defensible thesis or claim that establishes a line of reasoning. And look at the rules that they write down for decision making. To earn this point, the thesis must make a claim that responds to the prompt rather than merely restating or rephrasing the prompt. Now, that doesn't mean you can't utilize some element of the prompt in your response. However, and while we're at it, we might as well do this also. Let's pull up an actual example of some prompts, right? So that way we have it available to us here. Okay. So. Not like that. Like that. Okay, good. So let's look at this prompt here. And let's look at last year's prompts. Let's look at set 1. It doesn't matter. Any prompts will do. What is a prompt actually constructed of when it gets to the LEQ? The LEQ has 2 sets of information with each prompt, we'll call it. So you have this first sentence and then the second sentence. The first sentence is not part of the prompt, really. The prompt begins when they tell you what to do, when they issue the command. Notice there are no questions. You're issued a command. Do this thing. And if you don't do that thing, that's a really easy grade. You get a 0. Getting a really, really bad grade on the LEQ is very easy to do because all you have to do is not follow the instructions. If you don't give them what they want, you're going to get a 0. So, what is this first section then? What are they trying to give you here? A lot of students wrongly think that that can be used for context. It cannot, and it is not sufficient. That is not how this works. That is just framing the question in terms of time, era, location, and topics. That is not a context. It's not background. It's just a slight framing of the question. So you know, for example, stuff like what time period are we talking about here? What elements within the question are we actually looking at? For example, this one says religions, cultures, ideas, and traditions. It doesn't say economic trade networks or anything like that. So you need to keep in mind that they're kind of establishing parameters with these sorts of prompts. But the prompt is the second element. You must respond to this. You cannot choose not to. You cannot deviate from the instruction. If they tell you to develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which, and whatever follows is the prompt, you must do that. If you don't do that, it's a 0. You're not getting any points. You have to do the essay presented to you. You don't get an option. And those of you who want to try and sort of change that or find some sort of weird edge case to get around that or just feel like you're going to do it your way, go ahead, man. It's your college credits. You're playing with the wrong fire. Don't do it. Follow the instructions. There's no points for being clever. There's no points for trying to do something more difficult, something more challenging, for self-selecting the hard mode on your essay. There's no points for that. There's no courage points. There's no effort points. Doing the simplest essay in the most straightforward, direct, and efficient way always is the best strategy. And you don't need my words to prove it. All throughout the year, at least if you're one of my students, all throughout the year, what have we done? You've done essays, and some of you have scored very, very well with very mediocre work. Why? Because you're not really graded on the quality of your writing. You're graded on the quality of your response to the prompt, and that cannot be overstated. This is not holistic grading. This is grading by the numbers, paint by the numbers. If they ask for blue, put in blue. They ask for red, put in red. Don't be like, nah, I'm going to be clever. I'm going to mix blue and red into purple. I'm going to get them both. No, you're going to get a 0 because they didn't ask for purple. They asked for blue, or they asked for red. So you need to figure out how to do that. So that's priority number 1. Now, back to the rubric, please. So, sorry. Let me rearrange this. Okay. So, thesis. Now, if you look at the DBQ thesis is effectively the same thing. Response to the prompt with historically defensible thesis or claim that establishes a line of reasoning. Response to the prompt with historically blah, 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 exact same wordage. So what does that mean? It means anything you know about writing a thesis for either essay works. Now, really, really, really important, okay? Your thesis can be more than one sentence. Your claim, your argument, this is all the same thing, can be more than one sentence, but God damn it, it needs to be in the introduction. And it needs to directly respond to the prompt. Now, there are 2 parts to any good thesis. So what I'm going to write here applies to both of these, okay? What I'm going to write here applies to both of these. So what are the parts of a good thesis? So first order of business, part number 1. You must have a direct response to the prompt that gives the extent, right? Evaluate the extent to which is in both essays. Trust me. All right, if you look at those wording again, develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which. It's there every time. So you must have an extent, a direct response to that concept. And then if you go up to the DBQ, just for a second, because I like to prove what I'm saying, I don't like you to believe me for no reason. Evaluate the extent to which. That is the key to everything. Evaluate the extent to which. In other words, you have to tell them how much did this occur, how much of an effect, how much did it change, how much did whatever. And here the skill really will matter, and I'll explain that in a minute. So first off, you must have a direct and clear and defensible response to the prompt where you, in one sentence, declare your claim. So, The Yankees are a better franchise than the Mets. I've used this example many times. All right? That's a direct, clear, and defensible response to the prompt. I can't say the Shoreham Rainy River High School baseball team is a better baseball team than the Mets. It's not defensible. Nobody could seriously accept that argument no matter what evidence was presented. So, remember, you don't have to be right. You have to be plausible. And that's what defensible means. So if that helps you, I'll go ahead and slap that in here. You have to be plausible. That's the only standard that matters, plausible. You don't have to be correct. The grader is allowed to disagree with your conclusion as long as they can respect the argument as plausible. Then you are okay. Okay? So that's the first business. And effectively, when I do this here tonight, when I write a number like 1, that means one sentence. Second sentence will be 2. Third sentence will be 3. And this will repeat in every section. So you could think of this as more or less like paragraphing format, and I will explain that in a minute, okay? We'll get to the direct formatting in a moment, but for now, let's just go to the prompt and the parts of it. Number 2, in the case of the DBQ and the LEQ, you need topics you are going to discuss, realms, areas in which this claim will be evaluated. So I'll go back to my Yankee claim. The Yankees are a better Major League Baseball franchise than the Mets. And I can even say the Yankees are a significantly better baseball franchise than the Mets. Due to the fact, and I'd have to put due to the fact, I could have just put a period, and I could have said, this is shown in, which something like a simpler writer would write, this is shown by the number of World Series wins the Yankees have, their more successful sales of merchandise, and the number of players they have in the Hall of Fame. Those are 3 areas I can objectively evaluate and come up with objective reasons that are borne out by evidence. It doesn't have to mean I'm right. It just means the evidence I present needs to be objective. No one can argue the evidence. You can interpret the evidence differently, but if I present to you historical evidence, that evidence needs to be, everybody agrees on it. You know, the sun comes up in the east. It's not an argument. That's a fact. Now, we could talk about the extent to which that matters in various different forms, but that's a fact. So my evidence needs to be there to support my thesis. So these are 3 realms, what I call categories of investigation, that you are going to use in order to articulate your response in the essay. And these are a very, very, very important step. Now, in the DBQ, right, for the DBQ, we call this the grouping of documents into 2 to 3 themes. That's what we do in the DBQ. In the LEQ, we do 3 categories of investigation. Meaning, what are the categories by which you're going to make this decision? You know, how are we going to establish this, right? And that's a critical thing. And think about anything that can have a subjective argument. Mom walks into your bedroom and says, clean up the room, the place is a mess. Your argument could be, well, Mom, what do you mean by mess? Because mess is not an objective reality, right? What I consider a mess, what you consider a mess, what Mom considers a mess are 3 different things. So what are the standards, the categories by which we are going to evaluate whether or not the room is actually a mess? So you could use objective facts. You have a large amount of laundry on the floor. That's an objective fact. You either do or you don't, right? Or even if you want to say, well, large is subjective. Okay, you have laundry on the floor. That's an objective fact. You have a dish on there from dinner last night that you brought up to your bedroom. That's an objective fact. Now, whether that qualifies the room for messy, that is where the arguments of plausibility come in. Some might say yes, some might say no. Some might say, look, it's a dish that stayed there overnight. It's no big deal. Another person might say that's a sin. That's where the arguments come in. You don't have to win the argument in this essay. Don't attempt to win an argument. Your goal is to present a plausible defense of your claim. That's all you're asked to do. So, 3 categories of investigation. Now, with the LEQ, this is the biggest challenge. This right here is going to be the hardest part. And the reason why is this is, in effect, the full weight of your thesis here. This is going to be something where you bring up the facts in sort of a reference point, like I did with my Yankees example. I didn't talk about how many players in the Hall of Fame. I didn't talk about how many World Series wins. I didn't talk about the merchandising numbers. I just said they exist. I briefly referenced them. And that would all go in my introductory paragraph. And it would be sort of a 1-2 punch. I'd start with the claim. What am I claiming? And what are my categories of investigation? Again, you could do all this in one sentence. You could do a compound sentence. You could say the Yankees are a significantly better baseball franchise than the Mets due to the fact that they have more World Series wins, more merchandising sales, and more players in the Hall of Fame. That's one sentence, but it's really two. It's just a sentence that I've combined with another sentence through a compound word like due to the fact, like a compound phrase. You don't have to do that. You can do it like that, or you can put down a sentence and write two sentences. It doesn't matter. So that's the first bit. Has to get done. You should spend time practicing this, just the creation of these categories in each LEQ you can find. So again, this is their master page. Now, for those of you who are not from my school, I know there are some people here with that. To find this is very simple. You go to Google. You type in AP World FRQ. It's going to be the first thing on here, okay? You might have to log into your College Board account to get access, but you shouldn't have to. It's a public-facing website. It's not private. And here they are. These are all the essays that have ever existed for this test, going way the hell back. Now, as I told my students, you don't want to go back before COVID, so keep it to 2021 and more modern, all right? That's it. But if you look at these, you can look at each of these sets of free response questions, and as I was showing everybody before, I'm just going to click on it because it's here. Wrong thing. I'm just going to click on it because it's here. You can see for yourselves that there are a bunch of prompts. Come up with 3 categories of investigation for each of these. Make a claim, and then just decide, like a bullet list, what are 3 ways I could evaluate this? So let's do one together as a sort of an example, right? So I'll do one here. I'll do number 4, because number 4 is modern stuff. In the 20th century, technological advances in communication, transportation, medicine, agriculture, and other fields shaped human development and interaction with both intended and unintended consequences. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which new technology improved the lives of individuals during this period. Okay, so I need to make a statement about what I think about the extent to which new technologies improve the lives of individuals. Now, you can certainly get away on the simple end with something like, new technologies greatly changed the lives of individuals in this period. Or, sorry, improved. Change. It's not a change essay. It's an improved essay, which is a change essay with a particular type of change. Like, it's an effect of improvement, right? So, let me rephrase that. I could say something simple, like, new technologies greatly improved the lives of individuals during this period. That would be the bare bones minimum. It may not even be good enough as a claim. Rather than give an extent of the improvement by saying greatly improved, I should talk about the nature of the improvement. That's the right way to do a claim. So I could rephrase that to something like, the introduction of new technologies during the 20th century, always want to reference the dates, all right, during the 20th century, greatly reshaped the way in which human beings were able to integrate with the world around them in a globalized way. That's the nature of the change. And I'm laying it out as an improvement because I said it was an improvement. Greatly improved, improved the lives of individuals by this way. Now, I wouldn't stop there. That's not my categories. My categories would be, well, what would I use to investigate to make that determination? And I could say something like 3 different technologies. There's some right here, right? Now, I wouldn't say communication, transportation, medicine. I would pick technology specifically within those realms. Or I could say just 3 ways in which communication flourished. So, for example, I could say the introduction of the internet, web-based technologies that came with the internet that improved communication across the world, and digital banking greatly reshaped the way individuals interacted with the world and improved their lives. That would be a second sentence. That would be like my full thesis. I think that's really just like an adequate thesis. I don't think it's particularly sophisticated. Now, I used a couple times some sophisticated words there, but what did I basically say? The internet made people's lives better because they could communicate, they could connect, and they could do digital banking in a quicker way. That's all. I just came up with that. You could use social media. I mean, depending upon, what social media platforms are around, say, for example, in 1999, because it's the 20th century. So you can't go with the 21st century. Remember, the course ends in 2001, right? That's when it ends. It's your 20th century's beginning, effectively, or ending. So that would be a way you do it. Now, let's go back to this. So I really recommend you go in and do those categories of investigation. And if you have friends you can kind of knock ideas off of, do that. What did you get? What did I get? Don't say, come up with 3 and then share it out. Because you might go, oh, Oh, I never thought I could really look at something like the internet for that question, and that could open up sort of subconscious windows in your mind for things you could actually cover. That could be very, very, very useful. Now, is this the extent of your introduction? No. You need context. Now, here's the thing, right? Context in both of these essays is effectively the same thing. But DBQ context tends to be much easier than LEQ context, and here is the why. The DBQ context, right, describe a broader historical context relevant to the prompt. The LEQ context says exactly the same thing. This says this says that. Exactly the same thing. So why is it the DBQ is easier than the LEQ? Because the DBQ's got documents, which basically act like the jigsaw puzzle pieces of the document. So you look at this jigsaw puzzle and you go, all right, based on these pieces, I have a sense of the broader picture, and you could talk a bit about the broader picture. The LEQ, since you're basically defining your answer from kind of scratch, you can't just take an essay like this one, and be like, yeah, man, that 20th century was some crazy times, yo. There was wars, and there were fascists, and there were communists. No, you can't just give like a rundown of the 20th century. Your context, like your thesis, must be linked to the prompt directly. So broadly, what is going on in these technological advancements? And you'll have to say something like, here'd be a context you would do with this. And I would actually start the paper with the context. It'd be the first things I write would be the context. So I'd say something like, as the 20th century came to a close, rapid increases in technologies, particularly in the transition from analog to digital technologies, greatly changed the way human beings began to integrate with the world around them. Centuries old patterns that started in the Industrial Revolution slowly began to erode as new, quicker, and more efficient means of doing all forms of communication emerged. That's context. Now, that's easy for me. I grew up in that era. I know what it was like before and after digital technologies. So maybe that's not the one you want to do. You know my opinion. Don't do these modern ones. They're pretty tricky for what they are. But something like this, developed an argument that evaluates the extent to which the growth of industrialization led to economic or social changes. So talk about the background. Talk about what happened before industrialization. So you could say something like, the medieval framework of the majority of the human population being linked to serf agriculture ensured that human beings largely did not see a change in their work life dating back thousands of years. The commercial revolution of Europe, followed quickly by the Industrial Revolution some centuries later, led to a breaking of that medieval order into a new social and economic system that persists until this day. Context. That's it. Again, I know I'm making it look and sound easy. You have to practice it. Take these things and practice it. So again, that'd be the first thing I do. All right, I would do that. So what are we looking at for context? You're looking at probably 2 sentences. If I could be perfectly honest with you, 2 sentences. I mean, one well-written sentence can also make the place of 2, but I'm going to say 2 sentences. And those 2 sentences, right? Well, let me do it this way, 1 and 2. Those 2 sentences are something like, give a broader background that led us to this prompt, thesis, concept, claim, issue. Whatever the hell it is we're asked to do, this is the moment where you say, well, what got us here? What were the events that made this even a thing worth discussing? Right? So the Industrial Revolution is the essay. Well, what was going on before that? That makes the Industrial Revolution such a change that's worth discussing. And then the second sentence of this would be some mention of specifics about that background that do more than just reference the past. In other words, get some specifics. Like I used analog into digital. That's specific. But, however, be specific. Do not be detailed. This is not the time for long, drawn-out narrative. This is not the time for broad exposition. You basically hit those ideas, you name drop some things, you word associate some things, and you move on. Okay? Any of those greater details you want to bring them up in the actual body of the essay. That's definitely the better way of doing things. Sorry, my chat window fell off. I just want to make sure that no one's asking anything. Nope, I'm talking to myself. Okay, cool. Now, together, these two make up your introduction. It's not what I wanted, but it'll have to do. Where's my bucket? That's what I wanted. There. So together, these two make up your introduction. Like I said, you really want to flip them, but that's your intro. Now, we're going to leave off on the DBQ for a moment and not think about it. We're going to focus completely on LEQ because now the essays do get very different. So the next piece is evidence. Now on the LEQ, this is a very different thing than the DBQ. So let's pay close attention here to the LEQ. Evidence in the LEQ works like this. There are 2 points. You'll see it's 1 or 2, meaning there's a standard that gets you 1 point and there's a standard that gets you 2 points. All right, so do keep that in mind. Now, provides specific examples, notice examples is plural, of evidence relevant to the prompt. So to earn 1 point, the response must identify. Now identify is a fairly low standard. It's the same word that you see, for example, in the SAQ. Just like in the SAQ, though, you need to avoid just casual mentions. You need to give actual evidence. And I would follow that format we talked about today. Even here, that ACE format of answer the question. Now, in this case, that would mean provide actual evidence that speaks to your prompt. We'll get to that in a minute because that has to do with the topic sentences. 2, cite, give us evidence, actual evidence, specifics. All right? And then explain. And then explain. How or why does this demonstrate your point of view, your claim? And you could write that. This demonstrates that, and bring up your topic sentence. Now, I'll explain how to structure a topic sentence in a moment, but this is the way to do it. You have to repeat this thing several times in this paper. So mastering this 1, 2, 3 is critical for success. The second point comes in supporting your argument with this response. If you do what I'm about to teach you, you are automatically attempting the second point. Automatically. You don't have to do anything extra if you follow what I'm about to show you. So let's go. Here is how, again, we're going to ignore DBQ for now. Here is how you structure each paragraph. All right, this is going to be per paragraph structure. So this is paragraphs 2 through, in the case of the LEQ, you have 3 categories of investigation. So paragraph 2, 3, 4 all fall under this umbrella. Okay, here's how that paragraph gets structured. This is line by line. First line, topic sentence. What is the topic sentence? Every time, all the time, it must be you focus on one category of investigation. So here's an example of that. Okay, here's my little ghetto example. With over 20 World Series titles, the New York Yankees clearly outperformed the Mets along with every other Major League Baseball team, demonstrating their supremacy in the sport. Okay? Aside from me saying supremacy, there's no word up there you guys would not be able to use. That's a topic sentence. That's all you need. One sentence that takes one of your categories and lays it out. All right? I mentioned Yankees won more World Series titles, so I write that. With over 20 World Series titles, I give a little specific about it, but I could have said, the Yankees are better than the Mets because they have won a great many World Series titles. And that would be at the most basic level, correct, and still a topic sentence. But you must have a topic sentence. You must have a topic sentence. And the topic sentence must connect back to the categories, one of the categories of your thesis. And here is why. The rubric says, support an argument. Well, what argument do you have? You've got one argument. It's your thesis. That's literally, look, claim. A claim is an argument. Now, if you don't reference your own argument, or at least pieces of your argument, which is what claims are, right? If you don't reference it, you're not supporting your argument. Now, you might say, yeah, but it's obvious I'm supporting my argument. Nothing is obvious. It is your job as the student to demonstrate that you understand what you're doing. It is not our job as graders to assume you know what you're doing. And if you don't demonstrate your knowledge, that is your fault. It is not the grader's fault to assume anything. If you don't state it, that's your fault. So over-engineering answers is always a good idea. You know, You don't just say Hitler was a Nazi and move on and be like, well, everybody knows Nazis are bad. No. Your job is to show the world that you know why the Nazis were bad. So why don't you tell us a little bit about those Nazis? Like, that's your job. And you really, really have to get that through your heads. You cannot just say, well, I think I've said enough. If you think you've said enough, you haven't said enough. Say more. Say more. You're not going to insult your grader. Your grader's not going to feel like you're talking down to them. It's your job to show that you know the material. Yes, to a certain extent, this is a bit of an artificial conversation. You know, if I'm talking to one of my colleagues in my department about, let's just say, for example, some basic history thing, it doesn't matter what it is, I don't have to explain to them, oh, you know, if I mention Julius Caesar, I better mention that he's a Roman emperor. I don't have to do that. My colleagues know that. But I'm talking to people in the field. You should pretend you're talking to an adult who is intelligent enough to be taught but doesn't know anything about it. So if you were to reference, you know, a Roman emperor, you know, Julius Caesar, you should put comma, the famous Roman emperor. Like, you shouldn't just leave it Julius Caesar. Yeah, I know who he is. Do you? That's your job to tell us. So always add that little extra, okay? So back to this idea of a topic sentence, okay? The topic sentence is, in my opinion, the single most important piece of the entire essay. Because if you do this right, you set yourself up for a real possibility of a very high LEQ score. If you don't do this right, you set yourself up for a very high possibility of a very low LEQ score. So you have to do this. Now, that's the first thing. The second, third, fourth, etc., however many sentences it takes, you bring the evidence. This I can't help you with. This is, you have to know stuff. It's an LEQ. I can't fill in the blanks for you here. You have to know stuff. So what qualifies as evidence? Well, qualification of evidence is detail. You need detail. It's not enough to do vague references. You need detail. And it's very, very difficult for me to give broad guidelines about what qualifies as detail. So my best example, again, returns to go to these questions, look at the sample student responses for the LEQ. So if I look at a sample student response here, you can just scroll right down, go to the evidence section, and they will show you right here. Examples of evidence that are specific and relevant include the following. 2 examples required. Okay? And you'll see, this is not like write this. This is specific information about major merchant groups or merchant diasporas. Information about specific trade-based cross-cultural encounters in Afro-Eurasia. For example, Europeans in Japan, or Persian or Omani merchants in East Asia. All right, European chartered and or joint stock companies in Africa, in Afro-Eurasia, such as English East India, Dutch East India, and so on. Pax Mongolica. Like, you have to be pretty specific, and you don't just go, the Pax Mongolica made it so that way you could travel and trade on the Mongol Khanate. You have to tell us what it was. What does that phrase mean? Who started it? Where did it come from? Yes, Icicle Storm 13, whoever you are. Yes. Treat evidence on the LEQ very similar to evidence beyond the document in the DBQ. Think of it this way. The whole LEQ is a gigantic essay beyond the documents. Right? It's all the knowledge you've accumulated and whack it in there. Now you can see, like, for example, this over here, I'll zoom in. This over here is a quote from a student's piece of work. And this is considered a successful support. Support of the argument is the second point. So if you do this twice, you've got that point also. So take a look. This is a quote that's successful. Eastern inventions like the compass, the astrolabe, and gunpowder were adopted by Europeans, greatly improving maritime knowledge and shipbuilding, which ultimately led to the development of Portuguese trading posts in Africa and India, where missionaries began their efforts to spread Christianity. Look how specific that is. Notice it's fact, 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 and then conclusion about how it makes their argument. You can tell what their argument was from this, right? You could tell that their argument was something like the spread of Christianity, or the spread of this particular religion, or maybe any religion, was done through missionaries who spread as a result of trade network growth. You can see it here. You can figure out what the question was by how good this response was. And now, I gotta be honest, I don't think that's beyond anybody there. Now, some of you may not know what the astrolabe is specifically off the top of your head, but you're telling me you can't tell me that better shipbuilding technologies will help people spread around the world and therefore spread messages of religion that might lead to conversion? I think you could do that. Look at this one. After being expelled from Spain and other European countries, Jewish populations settled in the Ottoman Empire, bringing their own cultural practices and contributing to the flourishing of both Jewish and Ottoman culture. That's fine. So, the Jews are expelled from Spain and other European countries. They settle in a Muslim country. They bring their culture, and that culture contributes to both Jewish culture flourishing and also the Ottomans synchronizing with it and getting something out of it as well. Boom. That's successful support of an argument. You can feel, you can tell what the argument is behind these statements without even seeing the kid's whole paper. Now, again, I really recommend you scroll yourself all the way down on these and read the student responses. Now, the first one's always perfect, but still worth a read, okay? You can tell this kid really wrote this. It's all crossed out and everything. You know, obviously yours are typed now. And I believe, if I remember right, is this last year's? Yeah, it is. Okay, so there was some, I think, that might actually have typed responses in there. But, you know, read it and ask yourself the most important question. Could I do that? And which parts of it could I do? And which parts of it could I not do? You know, obviously this kid's got very nice handwriting, right? So if we look at this, like the kid changed a bunch of stuff. The largest network of the four is the Silk Road, which primarily traded luxury goods, but goods was not the only trade. The Silk Road would heavily influence cultural diffusion. With the introduction of new religions by merchants, Islam would greatly spread. Many Islamic ideas would spread, and many people in societies would convert to Islam, also adopt its practices. Oh, Africa and Europe was also... I don't know where they mean to put that. Anyway, it's generally true. Is it a little vague? It's a little vague. Could they use some specifics? Absolutely. Is it something every one of you could do? Yes. Yes. Would this kid get on their essay? I don't know. The second essay usually has like 3 or 4 points, something like that. They usually don't. It's definitely not a perfect one. It's usually like 3 or 4. And you can go and read all these. And man, would you be a fool if you didn't. Read it with a friend. Even if you do it, like, you know, digitally, get on a freaking Instagram chat or call or something and be like, all right, let's read this one. What would you give it? What would I give it? Why do you think it deserves a 3? I thought it had a 4. Well, where's your 4th point? I don't know. Isn't this support? Like, talk it over. Put your heads together with people. Get a study group going and make a little contest out of it, you know? Whoever guesses the most correct, I don't know, everybody buys them dinner or something, you know, like whatever. You know, make it a little bit of a game so it's got some competitive edge to it. It gives you a reason to care, you know, a reason to try, a reason to try to figure it out. And also, the best way of learning how to write something and what the expectations are is to see what the grades are when people get them graded. The reason I know what I'm talking about is because my students get really good writing grades compared to the rest of the world and compared to New York. So that's how I know I'm doing it right. I wouldn't know any other way. So you should read them. And then, you know, you take like the weakest ones, like the CSA is always the weakest. Find the weaknesses. I mean, this one's obviously like a bag of crap. Look how small it is. But all the same, is there at least 1 point in there? Is there 2? Where would it be? Look for it. How could you prove it? Where could you fix it? Where did they go wrong? Now, the second essay is usually better for finding those kind of like spots that could be repaired because, again, it's usually like some points, not 1. It's usually not terrible. And that first one is almost always perfect. So that's a problem. Well, not perfect, but always all the points. So, you know, you should see why. Like, take a look at it and always say, could I have done this? Do I know that? Do I know this? Etc. So, always worth your time. Now, back to planning. So, this is going to be your full paragraph. 2, 3, 4 sentences, whatever it is, of evidence. And evidence should always have the following structure. Give me facts, and then tell me why it supports your argument. You could do that in like a 2-line structure for every piece of evidence or just a 2-statement structure. In other words, because the Yankees have won so many World Series titles and the Mets have won so few, this clearly demonstrates that as a franchise, they have historically been better than the Mets. I gave a fact. I said why it supports my point of view, my argument, my claim, my thesis. Follow that model for every piece of evidence you have, and you will score well. The LEQ is not difficult. It's formulaic. You have to know some stuff, but once you know it and you're laying it out, if you lay it out objective or in a comprehensive way that makes sense and makes your argument, you structure it right, it will automatically start to earn you points. Now, everything here, what you see here, this whole thing, right? I'm going to copy this. Hold the phone. This has to happen again, and it has to happen again. Those are your 3 body paragraphs. Now, you might be running out of time. If you're running out of time, you don't have to do the 3rd body paragraph. This one is theoretically optional because you only need 2 examples. So if you don't get to your 3rd category of investigation, that's fine. However, my warning to you, it is often true that the 3rd category you come up with is often your best one, because the first one is your brain having like a stuttering fit trying to think of something. The second one is usually kind of meh, in the middle it's usually okay. And the 3rd one, by the time you get to the 3rd one, your brain has sort of had a chance to think, unclick the, ungrind the gears, think of the material you learned all year long, and usually the idea kicks in for the 3rd one. It's often superior than the first one. So you may want to do that 3rd one first. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to stay in order. Just make sure you have a kind of a thoughtfulness about that. Don't just go in guns blazing and start writing. That is a huge mistake. So that right there takes you through a lot of the essay. Now we're not done. Back to the rubric. So here's our LEQ rubric. So again, if we do that right, and if we have the statements in there that link it to the argument, you have the argument. Now, this is the point that I really, really, really need you to get. You have to identify when you read the prompt what the historical skill is. Is it cause? Is it effect? Is it change? Is it continuity? Is it similarities? Is it differences? Okay? You have to determine that. Once you determine that, whatever you write must keep referencing that skill. So I go back to our example. Development argument evaluating step to which new technologies improve the lives of individuals. That's like an effect or it's a change, right? It's either positive change or it's just an effect. I need to be talking about improvement, 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 improvement. Change, 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 change. Effect, effect, effect. I need to use that language all the time. Look here. Led to economic or social change. I need to be talking about changes. Changes, here's what it was. Here's the turning point. Here's what came after. I need to keep doing that. That needs to be the focus of the essay. If I keep that focused, if I keep referencing changes as the guiding light of the essay, I will automatically get this point. This point is a very important point because look at the strategy here. Thesis, you have to get at this point. Context, you have to get at this point. Everyone should be able to provide some evidence of some kind. Not everybody's necessarily going to be able to articulate a good argument, but everyone's got to be able to do number 1. So that's 3 points right there. You do thesis, context, and number 1 of the evidence points. I would love to think most of you can do the argument part. Let's just say it's iffy. Every one of you can keep talking about change or continuity or whatever in that essay. Just keep it going. Keep talking about it. Make it a feature of the essay. If you just keep bringing it up like that, as long as what you're saying is accurate, you will get this point. So notice, thesis, context, basic evidence point, historical reasoning skill. That's 4. If you could pull off this argument, that's 5 of 6. It's very achievable on the LEQ. Very achievable. And what's the average score on the LEQ? Well, I can tell you that because I have the Chief Reader Report. So take a look. I can tell you right now what the average scores were. So, long essay question on 20th century technologies, 3.26. That's the average score. All right. What was the average score on the other one? 3.19. What was the average score on the first option? 3.11. Those are bad, about half. So you get that 4th point, you're already beating the average. You get a 5th point, you are crushing the average. And that's the kind of thing that's going to take a 3 and make it a 4, a 4 and make it a 5, a 2 and make it a 3. You really, really, really need to understand that what points are achievable and which are, what's the word I want to use? Which are the most easily accomplished no matter what the topic is. That's what your focus needs to be on. Like, without a doubt, that is the key to all of it. If you do that well, you'll be good to go. Now, the age-old question: do I need a conclusion? Should I conclude? Do I need a conclusion? Short answer, no, you don't need a conclusion. There is no graded element that is expected to appear in the conclusion. There is no graded element that the conclusion is supposed to reference. However, also, I don't really know if you're going to have time for that. This is the last words of the last paragraph of the last part of a 3-hour exam. You're going to be absolutely cooked. I do not recommend that you sit there and try to formulate a conclusion at that point. Unless you really do have like a giant burst of energy, you're good to go, and you've gone to the bathroom, you washed your face, and you got 5 minutes left, and you feel like you could put something down that's got some meat. So what would you put in it? If you're going to do a conclusion, what should you put in it? Focus on context. Focus on getting that context in there again. Context can be anywhere. Unlike the thesis, which has to either be in the intro or the conclusion. Put in the conclusion, I'll slap you. No conclusion theses. Remember, some of you I've had the conversation with, and only if I had the conversation with you about this should you do this. There are some of you who very, very clearly write, and you're very good at summarizing what you wrote. You're not good at thinking about what you're going to write and then delivering on that. In other words, some people need to cook the meal and then decide to call it something. Other people can go, I'm going to make whatever, chicken franchise, and they can deliver chicken franchise. Some people need to mess around. They make something that's kind of like chicken franchise, but they didn't know what to call it at first because they really weren't sure what they were doing. But when they're done, they can look at it and go, that's basically chicken franchise, and then they can call it that. If you're that second kind of person where you're much better off writing something and then summarizing it, then I've already talked to you about this and said I'm okay with you leaving a big blank at the beginning of your essay, doing nothing, going right into context, leaving room for for a thesis, going into your body paragraphs, hit up those categories of investigation. You're still going to need to do that. Write them out, do it, and then make a cohesive argument when the paper's all over. But you know my fear. You're running out of time. You'll forget, whatever. I don't really recommend it. But I know for some of you it clearly was true that it would help you to do it that way. So if I discussed it with you personally, you'll know if I have. You have my blessing. If I didn't discuss that method with you personally, that means you're out there on your own like a wild card, and God have mercy on your soul. I hope it works out. I really do. But you have to be very careful because you could easily just end up not attempting anything. So, that is the way I would do an LEQ. That is the way in which I would go about doing it. So let's once again refresh. First paragraph. Context first, followed by thesis, right? Reverse the order here. Your thesis has to have direct response to the prompt, 3 categories of investigation. Must. You choose those categories. You decide what the response to the prompt is going to be. Your only restraints are that your response has to meet the criteria of the prompt. No going against the prompt. No deciding the prompt is wrong. No, nothing like that. Don't try to get clever. Deliver what they ask you to deliver. Then, that second paragraph onwards is going to be the topic sentence followed by all the evidence you can muster, followed by why this evidence you've discussed with us tells us the truth. Not truth. That's wrong. Support your argument. Not the truth. We're not concerned with the truth. We're concerned with it supports your argument. Okay? You repeat that again for 2 more paragraphs, time willing. And then finally, if there's more time willing, you can go ahead and conclude the essay. So that's it. That's the whole shebang. I think you can do it. I hope I've made it a little more simple to understand how to do it. I've got like 10 minutes. I want to give everybody a chance to sort of do some questions. So if you have a question for me, now's the time. Throw it into the chat and I will address them. In the meanwhile, I'm going to drink some tea. Because it's getting very cold, but it's very good. I got a like. Good for me. Don't send money. No super chats. Okay. Nobody? No questions at all. I mean, now's your moment. If there's any part of this that I muddled, stumbled, sounded like an idiot, was confusing, this is the time to tell me about it because it's not going to be time later, that's for sure. No? You're answering for everybody? Just no. Well, how kind of you. The mayor has spoken. There is no questions to be asked. The conclusion is what you call the fancy point, correct? No. So that's not true. So for me, the fancy point, I'll go over that, is the second point of this part of the rubric. The part that to earn this point, you must do these things. To earn this point, the response was demonstrate a complex... I'll get my fat head out of the way. Demonstrate a complex understanding. This can be accomplished in a variety of ways. This is the part... Oh my God, Mia. All right, Mia. Mia insists. Okay, fine. How do you get the full... Mia's asking how do you get the fancy point is what she's asking. This point, you get it by just simply sticking to the issue, the skill. Just keeping at it. How do you get this point? Well, the answer is you do these things and you do more than one of them. That's the answer. Now, here's the problem. Here's why I say don't pursue such a waste of time. What does the word nuance mean? It means whatever the heck the person reading the essay thinks it means. Okay, here, I'll move this over. Nuance is not something that is a objective standard. It's whatever the grader thinks. Now, this is objective, but this takes forever. Oh, I just lost my chat window. Hold on. This takes forever. Ever. This. Yeah, you could do that. But understand what the ask is there. The ask is there is that you're going to do both sides of a skill. Think that through. That means you don't just do the effects, you do the causes also. You don't just do the similarities, you also do the differences. That literally doubles the length of your essay. Now, a very skilled writer can do both. Because you could do things like say how, yeah, these two things are different, but they're different in some similar ways. And then you can sort of nuance it. But that's very difficult, and it will take a lot of real estate. And you're chasing you're doubling your essay to get 1 point. You could do this, but again, what is a relevant and insightful connection? I don't know. Whatever the grader thinks they are. Like these are not objective standards; these are very subjective standards, and that's my concern with it. You're spending a lot of time trying to chase somebody's particular taste. Confirming the validity of an argument by corroborating multiple perspectives across themes. Multiple perspectives would be something like examine the issue from the framework of like intellectual history versus political history versus big man history versus feminist perspective versus communist perspective. I mean, you have to have multiple perspectives in there. How would, say, for example, somebody who is an advocate of something like postmodernism, how would they approach this? This is historiography skill making. This is like college. This is beyond college level. This is graduate level history work. And it is not easy. And it's not that I don't think kids here could do it. I just think it's not worth doing considering the fact you have a time limit. If you had no time limit, I'd say, man, go get them. Then qualifying or modifying an argument. So this would be something like, oh my God, I did it again. This would be something like, there. This would be something like, okay, taking on the arguments of people who would disagree with you. So like I'd have to take on the argument of the Mets fan. And I'd have to Iron Man that argument, not straw man that argument. I mean, I have to give that argument its due and provide evidence as to why it might be right and I might be wrong. So I might have to say something like, and so the Yankees, despite all their great success, it is fair to point out that they did spend more money than any other baseball team, thus giving them advantages, especially over the last 30 years, that have made it so that way they could be more successful than teams that didn't have their levels of revenue and their ability to spend. That would be me taking my foe's argument and Iron Manning it, Steel Manning it, giving it more weight and more argument to support it in order to fully take on that point of view, that argument. That's very hard to do. Again, this is complicated stuff. And there's no guarantee that just because you did these things that the grader's going to be like, and now they're fancy. Like, no, not necessarily. There's a reason so few students get these points. There's a huge reason. It's hard to do. And then you have to ask yourself, in the time you spent trying to get this point, what else could you have done with that time? Like, could you have gone back and worked on your DBQ more? I mean, I don't honestly know on the digital exam. We're about to find out, I guess. On the real exam on paper, yeah, you could have gone back and worked on your DBQ with those extra 5 minutes. So what the hell are you doing worrying about the LEQ at that point? If you got time like that, take yourself back to the DBQ and go make sure that thing's okay. So it's not that I think it's a bad idea. I just think it's bad strategy. And at the end of the day, this is a game. You're paying say $100 to try to earn $3,000 of college credit to make yourself more competitive with other colleges. To simply go, well, I really want to challenge myself. I mean, folks, no offense, this is not that time. This isn't the time to get on the weight bench and go, all right, man, time for a new personal record. Even though you got to have a competition tomorrow. No, this is not the time for that. Play it safe. Be conservative in your choices. Go with the things that are safe, simple, and straightforward. You're not going to impress anybody with a harder topic done in a fancy way. I promise you, it won't work. It never works. Kids who are going to do the fancy point are going to earn them by just the nature of their quality of writing. Don't worry about it. Okay, really, it's not worth pursuing. I don't even think that point should exist. It's a bit silly. All right, I'm catching up on chat. Is the stream going to be posted afterwards? Yeah, all this stuff puts into a VOD. I don't know if yesterday's did. If it didn't, it's probably because I didn't go on there and promise them that I didn't abuse any children on it, which I have to do to get these videos to post. So I can take a look at that later. I think most of the stream stays up. Yeah, the stream should stay up as a VOD. Tonight's definitely will. Last night could have gotten copyright struck, I guess. There was a little bit of classical music in the background. Theoretically, that's not legal. But I don't know. I didn't get any notices about it, so I think it might be okay. All right, well, there's no stupid questions. There really are not. But it's just one grader grade. All right, so that's a good question. How are you graded? Well, I'll tell you the way you were graded, and I'll tell you how it's probably going to go. Your SAQs for sure are going to be graded by a guy sitting in front of a computer like me in pajamas, drinking coffee, or whatever they prefer to drink from home. That's how SAQs are graded now. They're graded from home. Are people trained? Yes. Is there a watchful eye of somebody making sure that their grading is consistent and accurate? Well, they're supposed to be. Now, back in the day when people met in person, and a lot of the essays will still be graded by hand in person, it was very much the case that you had a direct supervisor overseeing you. So the way that works is when you grade in person is there's a table of graders and there's a table leader. The table leader's job is to audit the grading of the table people. So they train them. In other words, here's the rubric. Here's the example paper students have written. What would you give it? Okay, we're not doing that this year. We're going to insist on this level for this part, this level for that part. That's where they massage this rubric and finalize their expectations. And then they grade. And the table leader will say, all right, grader 9, I need student 1237, 1236, and 1239. I need to see those papers. They get them, they read them, they see the grade the student was given by that grader, and if they're on calibration, meaning that they're doing what the table leader thinks needs to be done to grade this thing accurately, then they're good. If they are not, the table leader will call them over and correct their what they've done, and the table leader's grade will overwrite the grade of the grader. Now, if they continue to screw it up, they're actually sent out of the room and have to be fully retrained. If they're sent out of the room twice, they're sent home. No pay, no nothing. You go home. That's it. You're not good at this job. Now, there is going to be some at-home grading. I don't know if it's going to be for the essays. It'll definitely be for the SAQs. I think every single SAQ is going to be graded at home digitally at distance. I was considering signing up for it. I mean, they ask me every year. I got 22 years experience. I would get chosen tomorrow. The problem is that I don't want to spend, I got to commit 20 hours a week for not the greatest pay on planet Earth, and I got to do it on my free time at home. So, do I want to do that after a whole year of teaching for a couple of bucks? Not really. So that's kind of why I don't do it. But yeah, that's how it's done. It's just people who want to grade it. Now, these people have to have at least 1 year of experience in the course, but that's all they have to have. So when I tell you don't do things that are going to piss off your grader, man, I mean it. Do not present your work like you're lazy and dumb. Now, how do you avoid that? No ridiculous spelling errors. I'm sorry, it's not good enough. You can't misspell Ching, especially if Ching's in the question. That's ridiculous. It's lazy. It sends the worst impression to your grader. Should it affect your grade? No. But I got news for you. You never get a second chance to make a first impression. If the first impression your grader gets is you're sloppy, you're lazy, and you're careless, just think of how that's going to interact with people, right? Just think about it. If you show up to school on the first day of school and you got a giant mustard stain on your shirt, people are never going to forget that impression of you. Don't be the kid with the mustard stain on their shirt. Don't be the kid that comes walking out of the bathroom with toilet paper still attached to your foot. Like, there's no fixing that. You leave an impression, it's subconscious at that point. Take the time to spell things correctly. If you're not sure to spell something, that's fine, but do not get words that you have no right to get wrong. And things that appear in the question, basic words like, I've seen some really basic words misspelled. It's not good enough. It's just not, guys. 13th grade, you got to do these things. No, there's not a spell checker. I know you're used to it. So what do? So practice writing these things on a piece of software that doesn't have spell check, doesn't complete your sentences, and so on. And get used to whoops, I have to do that. Shut off the autocorrect on your phones. I've told you all that 1,000 times. It is what has created your bad habits. The fact that this thing will finish sentence for you, suggest words for you, and then correct your spelling, and you don't have to take any ownership of that on a thought process, is why you're functionally illiterate when you write. It's because you're not used to having to be held to a standard of making yourself known and understood to the person who's reading this, because the technology has done it for you. You need to get off that as quickly as possible. So it's not a bad question at all. That's a perfectly reasonable question. Alex, in order to get the first analysis point, do you just have to consistently mention the historical skill? Not just mention it. Keep it throughout the whole paper. It should be part of the whole paper. It should be about that skill. The changes in this, the changes in that, the similarities of this, the continuities of that, whatever it is. Keep at it, keep at it, keep at it. The real way to do it is to make sure that your categories are examples of the skill. So to what extent are the Yankees to what extent did the Yankees' spending of money, influence or affect their ability to win in games? I should be talking about effects of the spending of money. That should be my 3 categories. Because that effect is the skill. If the skill is change, 3 ways this thing changed. If the skill is differences, 3 differences. If the skill is similarities, 3 similarities, etc. All right? That's the way you should do your categories should reflect the skills. If they do, and then you reference them with the model I gave you, this all becomes automatic. You have to think about, am I doing the essay? It's happening automatically. I've given you a plug-and-play template that if you apply it, it'll just happen. All right? So, that's how you do it. All right, I'm on 9:03. I got 2 more minutes. So, you got 1 more question you can ask me. Because at 9:05, I got a break because I got to do something at 9:15. We'll be back here tomorrow night. Everyone welcome. Tomorrow night's going to be more open-ended. I think I'm going to go with my strategy I mentioned in class today. I forget which class I mentioned in, but got dared to do this. I'm sorry. Okay, well, I don't know what you're linking to. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. I'm going to assume it's a John Green video, and I'll leave it at that. But for all I know, that's somebody's OnlyFans. So no, we're not going to be linking to that. Sorry, we're not sharing links. Yeah, anyway. So tomorrow, I'm probably going to go with my strategy of, I have all those review videos from last year I did. They're still perfectly good. So why pay twice for the same real estate? My discussion of communism, my discussion of Latin America, my discussion of all that stuff is all on there. So I'm going to create a little playlist here, and I'll put that out in order tomorrow. You know, we're off, obviously. I'll put it out to you guys tomorrow to watch, and we'll spend tomorrow night just dealing with whatever you want to deal with. So gather questions, gather essays. How about you do some of this work tomorrow that we discussed tonight, and bring me with, like, your questions from it. Like, what did you think? What did you say? What did you feel? How do I know this? Why that? Hey, this kid that wrote in the sample essay on this year didn't get the point, or did get the point, and you said that that's not good enough, or you said that would be good enough. Could you go over why you think, like, yeah, like, give me that stuff. So come armed with information tomorrow, okay? For sure. All right, guys, 9:04. I'm going to call it. Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Hopefully it was helpful to you. If it wasn't helpful to you, well, you got what you paid for. $3 is what it cost you, so $3 is what it's worth. Adios. See you tomorrow.